What does TJ Parker's film suggest about his potential as a defensive playmaker for the Buffalo Bills? We're exploring that right now.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino. On today's episode, we are breaking down TJ Parker's college film to try and determine what type of ceiling he has as a playmaker for this Buffalo Bills defense. And for the Bills free agent additions, we've went through and we've done scouting report style podcasts that I'm going to carry into these draft picks. And so we'll start working through each of the draft picks, really just breaking down their film. And when I evaluate football players, I have 10 position-specific traits that I break them down through and I grade them through. And so for edge rushers, those 10 traits are first step explosiveness, flexibility, hand counters, length, hand power, run defense, effort, football IQ, lateral mobility, and versatility. So we'll discuss TJ Parker through all 10 of those traits, and we will get to a point where we come to a conclusion on what the ceiling is for this player. So we'll do TJ Parker today, and we'll get through the other picks in the coming days and weeks as we get ready for this 2026 Buffalo Bills season. So let's dive into it. TJ Parker, outside linebacker out of Clemson, 6'4", 263 pounds, 33 and an eighth inch arms, 9.5 inch hands. His relative athleticism score was a 9.38 out of 10. And keep in mind, he did not participate in the 3-cone or the short shuttle or the bench press. And the 3-cone and short shuttle may have been some tests that didn't score as well, where he ran a good 40-yard dash at 4.68 seconds, had a good 10-yard split at 1.61 seconds, 10-foot broad jump, 34-inch vertical jump. Those were all good tests, but he's missing out on some of the most important ones. Over 1,500 career snaps at Clemson, played in 39 games with 29 starts, and that's 39 games in a row. Durable football player so far in his career. 41.5 career tackles for loss, 21.5 career sacks. He's 21 years old, and he turns 22 in September. All right, so let's dive into it. We'll start with first step explosiveness. I think TJ Parker has average get off, and his snap anticipation is hit or miss, which is an important layer to being explosive off the ball. Not only do you need to be fast in your movements, but how good of a job do you do anticipating the snap and getting off the ball? And I think it's kind of hit or miss. I also find him to occasionally have a false step, where there are times where his first step is to the side and then he springs forward. And you really just want all of that energy and all of that movement going forward, as opposed to kind of taking a gather step, which I think is just wasted movement and takes away from his ability to get into his rush. But I'll say when he's clean off the ball and he anticipates the snap correctly, there's good get off. He moves quick. But can he be fluid off the ball? Can he anticipate the snap more consistently? That's going to be important in his development. The next trait is flexibility, which is not a strength of TJ Parker's. This is lacking. He does not have natural bend in his hips, and that leads to him needing to fold at the waist, which is not a position of power. And you're going to get buried if you fold at the waist with consistency at the next level when you're trying to turn and corner angles. And so, look, that's just not who he is. He's not a bendy dude. And when he's at the apex of his rush, when he's trying to turn and flatten and ultimately finish to the quarterback, he has a difficult time eliminating that surface area that he offers to blockers, and he can get stuck at the top of his rush. And I certainly wouldn't describe him as twitchy. So we have plenty of redeeming qualities, but flexibility is not a big part of what TJ Parker offers. Now let's get to hand counters. And I think he shows some real flashes here in terms of stringing together moves. His rush plan is built off of that long arm, which is what it should be. That's correlative to the skill set that he has. And he likes to work that long arm, collapse the width of the pocket, and then from there, it's all about greasing that angle, and that's where he has to find more consistency. When he's threatened the width, when he has extension, what are your go-to moves at that point to disengage from the block? And that's where there's a big need for some technical growth that's going to be important in defining his ceiling. Now, you see him work the long arm like we talked about, rip moves, chops, swipes. It's all there. It's about when he gets to the top of his rush and it's time to clear his pads, getting to the right move at the right time is what is really important for his development moving forward. Next up is length, and I think length is a strength for TJ Parker. He has 33 and an eighth inch arms, which, that's good length. That's not amazing. Like, there are pass rushers with 34, 35 inch arms. But I think the way that TJ Parker uses his 33 and an eighth inch arms is very effective, and it's foundational to who he is as a player. It's a critical part of his rush. Of course, with run defense and playing with extension, he does that well. And so I wouldn't say he has Greg Rousseau length or Calais Campbell length or anything like that, but he has good length and he uses it effectively. Next up is hand power. And I think he has really good hand power, gets his hands fit. They're not easily displaced. And so, trench play in the NFL, it's about a lot of things. But part of it is, getting your hands fit. And when your hands are fit, can you stay in control of the rep? And TJ Parker, when he gets his hands fit, they're not easily displaced. Now, I will say clearing his own pads is where I'd like to see a little bit more pop. When an offensive lineman has their hands fit on him, can he swipe and chop and get those hands off him to take back control of the rep? I think that's where you like to see a little bit more. But when those hands are fit, when he's playing with extension, that initial pop, it's all really, really solid. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about run defense, effort, and a bunch of other traits, and also just bring this all to a conclusion to define the upside of TJ Parker, the Bills' top pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. Workplace chaos, deadlines are stacking up, the inbox is overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed, Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. The NBA playoffs are here and every possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right. Turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. I like using FanDuel during the playoffs because everything I need is right there in one place. You can check stats, trends, and matchups before making your picks, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed. Whether you're looking at player props or just following your favorite stars, it adds another level of excitement to every game. It's a really super easy app to navigate, and it makes playoff basketball even more engaging. And look, the Stanley Cup playoffs are going on. Major League Baseball is in full swing. So plenty of great action to get in on over at FanDuel. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. All right, folks, welcome back. We're continuing our Scouting Report podcast on Mr. TJ Parker. Next up is run defending. And look, TJ Parker, he has the mass, he has the length, he has the power to be an excellent run defender. I think he processes blocking schemes pretty well. I think with a lot of defensive linemen, there's still some issues feeling the down blocks or feeling, if he's going to get ear hold on the edge with a crack block, like some of that stuff he can miss, right? But for the most part, I think he reacts well, he reads well, and he's super disciplined. His pursuit effort is excellent. I think he will be an above average NFL run defending outside linebacker / defensive end. Effort and motor is next, and I think this is clearly one of his best attributes. Dude always runs to the football, which is important. Like, if you've ever played defense, in your life playing football, you're told run to the football and good things happen when you run to the ball. And you have no concerns about TJ Parker and that effort in pursuit with consistently. And, obviously that's one way that effort can show up, but, just what type of temperament he has to get off blocks. He battles. He's never content to be blocked. He battles from snap to whistle. There are no concerns to me at all about his effort. I think this is one of his biggest strengths. Next up is football IQ. And I think I find him to mostly be a smart player. I think his recognition and processing skills are strong. He rushes well through his lane. He's not a freelancer. He does what he's supposed to do. I think he has room for some technical growth, which will obviously accentuate everything about who he is as a player. But I think he's a smart player that can process well, recognize well, and is overall a disciplined player within the scheme. Next up is lateral mobility, which I think is average for TJ Parker. I wouldn't say he's overly segmented when moving laterally. I wouldn't say he's overly fluid. I think he's average. I think he's got enough lateral movement skills that if you want to ask him to, drop into some shallow zones in coverage, I think he can do it and not be stuck in the mud. And then the lateral pursuit, especially against the run, is very, very good. So, look, is he super springy or twitchy? No. But can he efficiently move in space laterally? Yes. I think it's a perfectly fine trait for him that's not overly good or overly concerning. And then we get to versatility. And I think with defensive players, there's two different types of versatility that you want to be mindful of. What is your capacity to contribute against the run and the pass? And what is your capacity to play in different alignments? And so when you consider the first part of that, which is pass rush and run defense, I think that's what makes TJ Parker very appealing, is that he offers upside as a pass rusher and a run defender, where some of the other edge rushers in this class are more specialized skill sets, where they're either, really a high-end designated pass rusher like an R. Mason Thomas or a Cassius Howell, and they give you nothing against the run, or you have some guys like a Zion Young out of Missouri, or I hate to say Keldrick Falk. I think that's probably a little unfair, but those types of guys that are just, hey, we're going to own our space against the run. We'll give you, the modest ability to collapse the pocket, but for the most part, we're just firm run defenders. TJ Parker, I think, has upside in the pass rush game and in the run game. So that versatility is really good. Then there's the alignment versatility. Now, I will say this. I'm not sure that he's overly dynamic as a pass rusher or overly dynamic as a run defender, but I think he has a chance to be above average at both. Then there's alignment versatility. Now, Clemson played TJ Parker, of course, mostly as a outside linebacker, 5 technique, but he would play in some looks as a 3 technique. He would play over the guard from time to time. Now, for the Bills and in his NFL career, I think he's a 5 technique or wider. So hand in the dirt 5 tech. We can be a stand-up outside linebacker on the ball, right? Not a Matt Milano outside linebacker, a 3-4 outside linebacker. I don't think you're going to want to reduce him too far inside and play, 3 tech or a 2-eye or anything like that. Maybe some 4-eye, but I think 5 tech or wider is where he'll be optimized in the NFL. So what are his strengths? I think power, motor, run defense, and durability. Like we mentioned at the top, 39 straight games to close his career. When it comes to weaknesses, I would say flexibility. And then I hate to use the word technique because I think he does flash some good technique, but technique in the sense of, hey, you have some really intriguing physical tools in terms of length, mass. You tested explosively in terms of, 40 and vertical and broad jump and 10-yard split. How do we maximize all of that in the form of technique to make sure that our physical advantages are consistently leading to plays made on the field, right? I think that's where we have a lot of room for upward growth. So what's the bottom line here? I always try to take this entire conversation, and when I've written scouting reports in the past, I always try to hey, in one sentence, how would you summarize the player? Because I think that really gets you to the most important stuff. And look, I gave myself some liberty here. I have 2 sentences here to summarize TJ Parker. So here's what they are. TJ Parker is a power rusher with good length, but lacks flexibility and is still learning how to maximize his physical gifts. He offers 3-down potential and plenty of ceiling to develop into, but his technical growth will define what caliber of defensive playmaker he ultimately becomes. That to me is a perfectly fine second-round pick. I think that's exactly what you're looking for. I would not have loved the pick at 26. I think it's really good value at 35, especially when you couple it with the additional assets that the Bills gained from trading back. And so I think it's a perfectly good pick. Now it's about how do you help him develop more technical growth to lean into his power, to lean into his length, to lean into his mass, to lean into his hand strength, to be an impact defensive playmaker. And I think wherever he lands on the scale of that will define what type of player he is. Maybe he's just a really solid player that gets 5, 6, or 7 sacks a year. Maybe he's an 8 to 10 sack guy. Maybe he's a double-digit sack guy. How he develops technically will define where that lands. So there you have it. The TJ Parker Film Truth Podcast in the books. I'm excited to do Davison Igbinosun very soon. I'm excited for our conversation coming up with Bruce Nolan, where it's Bruce and Joe versus Bean, and we tell you exactly what we would have done in the draft. We've done that every year, I think at least 5 or 6 years, I would guess. So that's coming up this week as well. But ultimately, here's what you need to know. Buffalo Bills discussion is coming to you every day here on Locked On Bills, no matter when it is. May, June, July, in-season, playoffs, during the offs. It doesn't matter. We're here for you every day, so don't miss anything. Make sure you're subscribed. I'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.